How's that last semester going? Not good. Somewhere between senioritis and panic, right? Okay, that's good. That's good. So as Chris said, I have a lot of background with 509, 609 because I taught it for 7.5 years until my life just got to a point that I needed to say, I got to reprioritize here, and my son was playing competitive baseball, and although now he's not, but I changed and went a different direction. So Chris was my student, Chris has been my intern, and it's been exciting to watch her grow up as a young professional and into her career. So I'm really honored and appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you all. Crisis communication is something that's near and dear to my heart. I work for Friends of the Zoo, which is the nonprofit organization at Dickerson Park Zoo. I've been there a little more than 21 years. So in 21 years' time, I've seen my fair share or unfair share of crises happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm also going to talk about just crisis management in general and bring my perspective to it, a lot of which was sort of formulated by the material in this class whenever I was teaching it. So if some of it sounds a little familiar, which I hope it does, hopefully it's just reiterating the things that you're learning in class. So who can define crisis for me? What is a crisis? Yes?
Any negative event, well not necessarily always negative, but typically negative event that's unforeseen for an organization.
Okay.
A situation that disrupts the everyday workflow of an organization.
Okay, that's an important part of it, that it disrupts the workflow or the outcomes that an organization is trying to do. And ultimately, what are most businesses and nonprofits trying to do?
Make money.
Make money! There is nothing wrong with making money, folks. Money makes the world go round. Whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit business, you have to have money to operate. You keep the lights on, you pay your staff, you buy your products, you sell your products, you provide your services, whatever it is. The difference between corporate and nonprofit America is that in corporate America, you're paying a portion of your profits to your shareholders, or in the form of stock dividends, or to the family members who own part of the company if it's a family-owned business. In the nonprofit world, all of that profit is being put back into or reinvested in some way in the organization. So for Friends of the Zoo, the profit that we make helps to fund education classes at the zoo, our education programming, and helps to fund our conservation work that we support out in the field, as well as paying our staff and making some projects and programs at the zoo happen. So anything that disrupts our ability to ultimately make money, serve our customers, serve our guests, provide whatever it is that we're trying to provide is a crisis. Now, sometimes that takes the form of sort of an all-stop kind of crisis, but sometimes it's a crisis in one area of the organization while another area of the organization can still sort of function. So for whatever that might look like, it may be that your manufacturing process can go on, but you're in a financial crisis because of a lawsuit, or you're in a personnel crisis because of the death of your CEO, or whatever it might be. So sometimes it's not an all-stop of work, but it is something that is disrupting your ability to make money. It's also something that's disrupting your reputation with your important audiences. So it has a negative effect with those individuals, can put you in a negative light. So what constitutes a crisis? One semester while I was teaching, the first day of classes, there was a water main break over around McDonald Arena, and it resulted in the water being turned off at Blair Shannon. Does that constitute a crisis? Who says yes? Who says no? Who doesn't care? Because I didn't see 13 hands go up. Not a crisis. What's the main university function?
Education.
Education. So not having water at one dorm, how does that disrupt the education process? It's an inconvenience to those students who don't have running water in their dormitory because they had to go across the street to Freddie, or they had to go to Hammond Center or wherever it was to take a shower, but they were still able to take a shower. They still had drinkable water available to them. They just didn't have it in their dorm. So crisis or not, who would like to vote a different way? Would you like to change your vote?
Mhm.
Yes, okay. Now, for those students living in Blair Shannon, did it feel like a personal crisis? Sure, but the sky's not falling. It didn't end their education career. They weren't really physically hurt in any way. So it's a disruption, but it's not a crisis. So somebody tell me, what is a genuine crisis for the university? And you can pull something from the headlines if you'd like to. Yes, ma'am.
Shooting on campus,
A shooting on campus. Absolutely. Why is that?
because they would have to evacuate campus and nobody could go to classes and be educated.
Okay, so it's a lockdown or it's an evacuation of campus. What else does an active shooter on a university campus or a bomb threat or a shooter threat do for the university community? What other element of the education atmosphere does it affect? Safety. So don't you want to feel safe? Don't your parents want you to feel safe in your university? These doors used to not have locks on them. They have a lock from the inside now. Why is that? Intruder. Although this one doesn't work. Huh. Great. You might want to put in a maintenance request on that one. Intruder. So I can lock it from the inside if I'm the teacher or sitting next to it, right? How many of you have university alerts coming through on your cell phones? Everybody should, probably, because I think you're automatically signed up for it. It's really not an opt-in, opt-out kind of thing, right? Why is that? Why do they have the university alerts? Yes, ma'am.
So you get the news fast,
Mhm.
instantly.
Because how frequently are you checking your email over the course of the day? You may check it often, but if they send out a message by email and you don't check your email for 2 hours, you may not get that message for 2 hours. So the fastest, most effective way of getting messages out across the university campus, across the university community, on or off campus, is by mass text. When I was teaching and in the university system, I got it texted, emailed, and an automated phone call. I don't know if we still do that. You can opt into all of those options. So that's one of the safety protocols that they have for specifically for cases like active shooter. What else would constitute a crisis at the university?
We had the social media guy, he stated a snow day was considered a crisis for him. Because it disrupts because if we had to go in, we had to take care of, cancel classes, so we considered it a crisis.
Yes, I wouldn't say that they're full on crisis mode for that, but certainly something that's protracted, so very long in duration, and I'll give you an example here whenever I get a little farther into my slides about something that really did constitute a not only university-wide but citywide, countywide winter weather crisis. So a snow day, yes, to a certain extent, but there are still certain functions that have to happen at the universities. So unless it's a blizzard of 18 inches, when the city's completely shut down and they completely shut down the university and nobody comes in, maybe not, a full-on crisis, but definitely elements to crisis in that for him. So, does this sound familiar? A major occurrence with a potentially negative outcome affecting the organization, company, or industry, as well as its public products, services, or good name? Does that sound familiar? We did not plan this. This is in every crisis communication presentation that I do. But there's some really key elements to this. It's a major occurrence, right? So it's something big that happens. It has a potentially negative outcome because maybe it does or maybe it doesn't. And I would say that there are elements of crisis communication that actually go into play in positive kinds of situations as well, and I will explain that in a little bit. affecting the organization, company, or industry. So maybe things trickle out on a larger scale, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, as well as its publics, products, services, or good name. And good name is your reputation, right? So things like recalls can affect your product stability. It can affect your audiences. So think about the airbag recalls across multiple brands of automobiles. My car has been in the shop twice. Once to have the driver's side airbag replaced, and again to have the passenger side airbag replaced because it had ramifications. The recall was done separately on those. I don't know why they didn't just do it all at once, but they didn't. But it was recalled for the driver's side, and then it was recalled again for the passenger side. But it was all part of that really large scale. So think about that and keep that in mind as you're thinking about what crises are. So some of the things like, and I know you're talking about environmental events tonight, what are some of the other types of crises that you've talked about? Give me an example. Yes, ma'am.
Like the protests and stuff that happened on the zoo's campus.
Mhm.
That was kind of a crisis.
So that's kind of a people matter. That's created a lot of problems for Mizzou, hasn't it? The legislature is looking at budget. There's a lot of reputation issues going on for the university. There are a lot of donors to the university who are rethinking their donations, as well as prospective students. So that university reputation and what prospective students may think about that and whether or not they want to be part of that university community. How about some of the things that have happened right here at MSU lately? Juan, right? And I've known Juan for a long time, from back in the day when I was a student here. But what has that done for the university in the local community in terms of reputation and just sort of things just coming back up and back up and back up in the media about it? Yes, ma'am.
Kind of puts us in a bad light as a university and just that we're not, it makes us know we're not addressing diversity in a way.
And diversity is one of those things that over the course of the past few years, the university has highlighted the steps that it's taking to improve diversity and diversity services on campus. And then you have something like that happen. And so you have what the university is saying that it's doing, and then you have a situation like this that is at odds with that. So that does affect the university's reputation in the community. Okay. So maybe you've seen this or not. Timothy Coombs is a researcher that's done a lot of work in crisis communication. This is the 35,000 foot view though. This is the crisis management process. So the idea that it's a very cyclical process. You don't start at any one place on this. That's why it's a cycle. It's not linear. So at some point you jump in and you're doing what you can to prevent and prepare for crises. Ultimately you're in a response mode at some point, and then coming out of that response mode, which may be something as simple as a drill or simulation, then you go into the evaluation mode to look at how you responded, and that leads to influencing then your preparation and planning for future crises. So you're always at some point in this cycle. One of the things I can tell you about the world of zoo is that we frequently do drills, and I'll talk about our drills when we're talking a little bit more about preparation and response. But we do drills quarterly. And primarily one of the reasons we do that is we're required to for our accreditation with the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So we do various types of drills, not just animal escape, but we do injury drills, or we do venomous snake bite drills, so that we practice those kinds of activities and our response is ingrained in us. We're not pulling down a binder going, okay, now what do we do? But a drill in this scenario is part of that response action because you're practicing what your response would be. So the thing with prevention is you really can start with just some of the basic, obvious things. So being in an office, being weather aware. So do you know what kinds of things are happening in the weather? And that may be that You have a weather radio. So a few years ago, we installed weather radios in the office. In fact, it's in my office, at our gift shop, at our keeper building, and in our education building. Those are places where people typically are all day long. It may not be the same person, but someone is in that area all day long. And it gives us the ability the radios, you can program for the counties. So we've actually programmed them for 5 different counties. The ones that are leading toward Greene County, that are in the most likely scenario of weather moving into the county, and then for Greene County itself. So typically when we start getting warnings, it's because it's a county away from us. What does that do for us?
Helps you prepare.
Buys us time, because guess what? If we've got severe weather moving in, we have a lot of animals we have to move in, and then we also have to know what to do with our guests. So the very minimum thing of being weather aware, I do a lot of work with the Greene County Office of Emergency Management, and I volunteer. If we were to have a major disaster in Greene County, I would be called in to work in what's called the Joint Information Center, which is basically all of the PR people and public information people who are active in disaster response. And I'll give a couple of examples of that here in just a few minutes. But I would be pulled into that. Because of that, I'm tapped into the Emergency Operations Center alerts that come out. I'm following them on Facebook, and they're one of those that I get notifications of. And then once a month, can anybody tell me what happens at 10 o'clock on the second Wednesday of every month? Yes, ma'am. Tornado sirens. It's not just tornadoes though, that's actually severe weather sirens, because they could be used and have been used for things like straight line winds, which is not a tornado, it's a different scenario, but it's still very dangerous. So what that tells you is if you're outside and you hear that siren, you need to get to a news source to find out what's happening. You can't just assume that that means tornado. It may mean something else. So that tells you to get inside and find out what's going on. What the emergency management people will tell you is those sirens are not designed to let people who are indoors know that there's a problem, because they would expect that the people indoors have the radio on, or the TV on, or they have access to a telephone and they have communication coming at them another way. Those are really outdoor alert systems. We have one at the fairgrounds, which is right next to the zoo, so we hear it every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, or every second Wednesday at 10 o'clock. But about 9 o'clock in the morning on the second Wednesday, I get a phone call at home, a phone call at the office, and text messages, a phone call on my cell phone, because I have 2 cell phones, and text message and an email from what's called the IRIS alert, which is the Emergency Operations Center's ability to mass text all of those people who would need to come to the Emergency Operations Center in the time of the disaster. So they test that every month to make sure that those messages are coming out. And they expect us to respond in some way to let them know that we got our IRIS alerts. So being tapped into that, I get a lot of weather information, and I'm able to relay that then out to our senior staff who are out on the grounds, the veterinarian, our director and curator. So we're very weather aware, but we have to be, because our animal safety is a top priority, but even more so than that, the safety of our guests and our staff is absolutely paramount to our functioning. Things like data backup are really important, and one of the lessons that we learned in the aftermath of 9/11 is the need for redundant and off-site data backup. So I see Chris has her external hard drive up here. How many of you have had assignments or projects or big papers that you put on your computer and you have a hard drive failure? Has that ever happened to you? And you get that sick feeling and you're like doubled over and you're trying to call and you're panicked because it won't print, or you can't pull it up, or it's not the revision that you just did, or whatever it might be. Redundant offsite data backup when you are a business. What happened at during 9/11 was when the buildings came down, many of the businesses and some of the financial businesses that were in there, they had their data backed up, but it was on servers in the building. Well, guess what? That kind of goes away when the building's burning and collapsing. So Cantor Fitzgerald was one of the most significantly affected organizations because of where their offices were in the Twin Towers. But they lost a lot of client data because they didn't have offsite storage. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, NOLA.com, NOLA.com, which is the website of the Times-Picayune newspaper, which is the New Orleans newspaper, the only reason that it was still functioning was because they had just moved the files to another city, a server in another city. And so their website stayed up, and they were able to update their website and provide critical communication and information in and out of the city. So to the people who could still get information, but reporting out via their news or via their website. But it was only because they had that off-site and in fact in another city storage. So you've seen an uptick in things like external hard drives or external backup systems. Cloud-based computing has made a huge difference in being able to store your data either in a cloud or use the cloud transmission to a Barracuda storage or something like that. And that's critical if you have sensitive data, which most businesses do. Financial checks and balances. St. John's Mercy Hospital, their School of Nursing, someone got away with $750,000 because why? She was able to write checks to herself. I went to high school with her. I was fascinated by the fact that she was smart enough to figure out how to do that. She's in jail. But, I mean, she lived on the high life for quite a while on $750,000. That's a lot of money. But there were no financial checks and balances. She was able to write checks to herself, take them to her bank, and deposit them. Imagine that. $750,000, people. That's a lot of money. Succession planning. I have to give kudos to my friends over at the Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau. They have a succession plan so that if their top level managers are incapacitated, pass away, or leave unexpectedly, they have a plan for each of those positions as to how those responsibilities are going to be farmed out to other people and what the process is for replacing them. Most businesses don't have that. And when you talk about what's your succession plan, we don't know. What's going to happen when your president has a heart attack and dies? Who's going to take over? We don't know. Okay, so it's kind of like, what's the succession plan for the United States? If the president dies or is incapacitated, then who's in charge? Vice President. Anybody tell me who comes after the Vice President?
Speaker.
Speaker of the House, and then who comes after that?
Secretary of State.
Is it the Secretary of State? And then who's after that?
Probably the next person in the
Leader of the
cabinet.
I believe
The
it's
next person in the cabinet, whoever that is.
I believe isn't it somebody from the
This is
Senate?
the plot of the movie.
It's, yeah, Speaker of the House is
White House
up there,
down.
and then,
Because the president of the Senate is the vice president.
Correct.
So it could be
right, but the point is that there's a plan, right? So we know, and they know, which is why you never have the president and the vice president at the same place. They don't travel on the same, and there's always a cabinet member who is not where? At what? Where is there? There's always a cabinet member who is absent from what big event? The State of the Union. Why? Because everybody else is at the Capitol. The president and the vice president and all of the major leadership, all of the cabinet, all of the top defense people, they are all there except for one. And how great would that be to be the one that gets to draw the short straw and gets to sit in the bunker for the State of the Union address and watch it on TV? Because you're in charge if that building blows up, right? But at least they got a plan, right? But the president and the vice president never travel together. And there's a reason. That's not to say that, it doesn't work. You gotta have that in your own business. I don't have it, we don't have it at ours, which I have pushed for it. I'm like, we need to know what to do if something happens. to our top leaders. But that's why I say kudos to my friends over at the CBB, because they have thought through that. And it's really not a pleasant thing to think about, because you don't really think about people being incapacitated or dying. So what does crisis planning for the zoo look like? First of all, yes, I'm the PR marketing person. I also do a ton of other things, which I won't bore you with, but you can ask me at the end if you want to know more about my job. But in the course of planning for all of those things that can happen at the zoo, there are a number of crisis plans that we put together. And they're more like crisis action plans, response plans. So things like weather. So what are our weather protocols for winter weather, for summer weather, for severe weather? We have a whole range of weather protocols because elephants can handle things maybe that flamingos can't. Or we need to lock certain animals in during certain types of weather because it's too cold or the ground conditions are too incompatible with them. So like you don't want giraffes walking on ice, right? Because they would splay their legs out and that would be really bad, okay? Temperature, so temperature, ground condition, precipitation, even high winds, and then you get into things like severe weather. So we have a lot of weather protocols. We also have things like dangerous animal escapes. So what do you do? What do we classify as a dangerous animal? And what do you do if that animal escapes? How do we respond to it? Now, I will tell you that one of our drills looked like this, and you gotta love our director, Mike. He, at one time, was very involved in the drills. Some of the senior staff has taken on the process of working with the drills, but I remember one very vividly. And he had an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper on his desk, and he wrote on it, "I'm an escaped cheetah." And he got on a golf cart, and he went and he found a random zookeeper out on the grounds, wasn't necessarily close to the cheetah yard, and held it up, and the bottom line was, "This is a drill." So he held it up, and the person read it, and he jumped on the golf cart and took off. That person's job, first of all, was to give very important words at the beginning and the end of her radio call, which was, "This is a drill." 4 very important words. And she did, okay, she did. But off he goes. So, you know, this is a drill. We have an escaped cheetah at this area. I have eye contact with it. It is heading blah, blah, blah. A lot of our drills happen before the zoo opens because we don't want all of this mayhem affecting our guests. Because, you know, he's bobbing and dodging in and out of places, you know. And at some point, he parks the golf cart and takes off through the woods. They gotta go find him because animals will do that. So he was acting like a real escaped cheetah.
On a golf cart.
Well, on and off a golf cart. You know, so I mean, at some point he was running through the bushes, and you know, but it was their job to keep eye contact with that animal, anticipate where it might go, and get people on the other side. Barricade areas. The maintenance staff's job is to go around and lock all of the perimeter gates and be there then so that there's no access in and out of the zoo by anyone who's not authorized personnel, or to be there to let emergency people in. So all of our gates are staffed. The guest services staff, their job is to get all of the public into safety. So the one time, somebody asked me not too long ago how many animals have escaped while I've been at the zoo, and I told you I've been there 21 years. I think I can count on one hand the number of times that we've had an animal escape. The one that I vividly remember is when a bear escaped, and I took the call from the guest who said, "Hi, I'm up in your Missouri Habitats area, and I think one of your bears is out." I, of course, had the brilliant response of, "So what makes you think that?" You know, because you never know. Sometimes they don't realize that there's a moat or something like that. And he said, "Well, I'm standing by the fence here between the raccoons and the bobcats, and there's a bear on the other side of the fence." Okay, sir, first of all, I want you to walk away, but back away so that you know whether or not that bear comes after you. She was on the other side of the fence. Now, granted, she was an old, very obese bear. She was not going over that fence. She basically lumbered down the hill and got to a fence and was like, "Okay, I'm not going any farther." What happened was the zookeepers had been doing some work, and the maintenance guys had been doing some work in the yard, and there was a miscommunication. Somebody thought someone else had shut the gate after they took the equipment out of the yard, and that person hadn't shut the gate, and somebody didn't double check that the gate was shut, let the bear out for the day, and she found the open gate. And that's what, and this was like 9:30 in the morning. Our bookkeeper was on the phone with the senior keeper, and I knew who she was talking to. I went over, grabbed the phone, and I said, so we have a bear out, blah, 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 blah. I will not repeat what he said because it turned the air blue. And they went up, and fortunately, she loved buttermints. And so they got her back to her yard by giving her buttermints. And remember, old, very obese, not moving very fast. But that could have been very, very different if it were the bears we have now that are like 6 and 7 years old and still climb trees. So that was really memorable, mostly because I'm the one who took the call from the guest and said something brilliant like, what makes you think that? What else are you gonna say, So we plan for things like dangerous animal escapes. Did you talk about Bronx Zoo Cobra? Okay. By the way, totally know the whole backstory on Bronx Zoo Cobra, and she double checked it with me. But we drill for and we plan for things like venomous snake bites, because we have venomous snakes that one itty bitty drop of their venom will drop a human being like that. Not exactly the snake you want to tangle with. Not too long ago, we did a venomous snake bite drill, and unfortunately, they were testing the audio alarm, which is like this big red siren looking thing, and there's a button on the inside of the building that you hit that and it alerts the alarm company, as well as triggers this alarm then this siren that can be heard all over the zoo grounds. So the person who started the drill forgot those 4 really important words, but I kind of sensed from the radio communication that it was a drill. And I went into our zoo director's office and I said, please tell me this is a drill. And he was like, well, yeah, I think they were doing one this morning. Okay, this is a venomous snake bite. We need to know that this is a drill, because it included the alarm company calling the office and saying, we are monitoring a snake bite alarm. Should we dispatch ambulance? We need, I think it's a drill, based on what I'm hearing, but hang on. Please tell me this is a drill. Okay. So those are 4 really important words that got forgotten, but I reminded them that needed to happen. So what are some of the other things that we do? Obviously we have a media protocol and a crisis plan, which I have used in various things. We also have a procedure for veterinary drugs, because some of our veterinary drugs that we use to anesthetize the animals, and particularly if we have to dart an animal that has escaped, again, very, very powerful, and we have a narcotics license, so we have to know exactly how much of that drug we have and how much is dispensed. So we have all of these protocols that go into our crisis planning. And Mama always said that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So everything that you can do on the front end of preparing for a crisis will help you once you get into the response and recovery phase. Because the better you are prepared and planning, the better you're going to come out on the other end with your reputation intact, and the quicker you will get back to business as usual. So what preventive actions can you take? We've already talked about some of them. This happens to be a photo from the shooting at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech was sort of that tipping point that began the universities and secondary schools putting in place things like mass texts. This technology was just becoming available at that time, but they didn't put it in place. They didn't have it in place at Virginia Tech. So the messages that were going out about the active shooter and the campus being closed went out by email. And that was one of the things that was a huge criticism of Virginia Tech. And it was after that then that universities, including Missouri State, put those systems in place. But it's important to also see what's happening in your industry or in similar industries so that you can react to things like that. So writing a crisis communication plan goes hand in hand with your facility planning. So all of the things that we do at the zoo, I'm involved in terms of thinking about it from a crisis communication standpoint. So one time we did a drill that a child had fallen into the cheetah yard. Don't ask me why we do so much with the cheetahs, I don't know, it's convenient, I don't know. But I walked up to one of the keepers and I said, and remember, we do this before the zoo opens, I said, did anybody check with any of the guests who might have taken pictures or video? Deer in headlights, crickets. Okay, because that's really important, because why? Nowadays, this was back before social media, but where's that video or where are those photos going?
Straight
They're going straight up on the internet, right? Okay, they're going to social media, they're going to Snapchat, they're going to Instagram, they're going to the news sites, whatever it might be, right? Why else might that be important? You can see what happened. Those people are witnesses. And that may be key to understanding what happened, because it may be firsthand images of what happened. So it's really important. That's my job to think about in a crisis, is to think about what's the effect of the presence of guests in that area and talk to them. And I have no problem offering to buy video or photos because they're going to provide it to the news media anyway at some point. But I would like to have it for records and for investigation. It's important that all of your employees are informed, and I will talk a little bit about what happened when we had the death of a keeper in the line of duty and what we did for our staff on that. Basic media relations, and I know you've talked about this, but you always go with fact-based messages. You don't speculate, and trust me, the news media will ask you to. So if it had happened at XYZ time, what would have been blah, blah, blah. So the bombing of the Burra building in Oklahoma City, if it had happened at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, how many people would have been present in that building?